board will come to order. We do have a quorum. I've got the roll up here. Have you got it,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Director?
We do have a quorum to conduct business.
Okay. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes of the?
Two comments.
Okay.
On page 2. Good job, by the way. On page 2, the very last sentences, there's a P missing from the map. On that. That's the second page, bottom, last sentence. The proposed mall. When I do it. And on page 3, when we mentioned the Mac had raised a question, can be concerned from local businesses and franchises. It's actually constitutionally not legal, it's by state law. So I think it's the easy check on. But that's it.
Anything else on the minutes? If I get a motion to accept them as amended.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so that takes care of that. Now, I just went and checked. Nobody had signed up to speak publicly. Anybody want to change their mind and say anything? Okay. All right, so a little bit of housekeeping before we move along. Mr. Paisley called me this afternoon to say that he'd had some surgery on his shoulder and he's recuperating, convalescing. Might be watching us tonight. So if he is, hope you are in fact recuperating. But he's asked Ms. Allen, who is our new county commissioner, to come and sit in. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your willingness to help. And if you want to say anything as a county commissioner, well, you're certainly welcome to, or we can just move right along. Okay, all right. So now we got that. Old business. Unless if somebody wants to do something different.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So on your agenda there, these are itemized, 1, 2, 3, the map, the table of uses, and then the definitions. I would imagine our discussion tonight is going to really just kind of flow between the three, and that's perfectly fine with me if that's perfectly fine with you guys.
Yep.
I also think it's important to note that I don't expect you to vote on anything tonight. All of this is still in the draft stages. We're still in the process of the give and take, question and answer, critiques, comments, and all that good stuff until we get this to a refined product that we feel good about. So starting with the map. Since our last meeting, the most notable changes that you will see to the map have been to reduce the sizes of the mill villages and the rural community districts in almost all cases. Some of them may still seem a little large or larger than they should be, like Snow Camp in the McRae community, for example. But that is more a result of keeping large parcels intact. By making sure that the entire parcel, the road frontage, for example, is all in the same category. So in other words, let's say there's a large, 20, 30 acre parcel that's at one of those rural crossroads. We didn't think it made sense to have half in one category and another half in the other. So the entire 30 acres would be in one. There are also 2 new properties dedicated as parks and open space. Those are the current Shallowford Park near Ospey, and a property being converted into a park in the Carolina Mill Village. Based on your feedback from the last meeting, specifically the changes that we incorporated are, as I mentioned, making the rural community smaller and tighter to the crossroads, using roads and natural features like streams as district boundary lines, adding more suburban transition areas along, suburban transition parcels along Highway 70. Before getting into the rural residential areas, keeping RV parks in rural residential's old ag districts, reducing the size of the Altima Hall Mill Village, and clarifying the rural community area just south of Ospey and the suburban transition district around it. And then one final note is Henry had talked about possibly a rural community center south along Highway 49. we really just didn't see an intersection down there that made logical sense. Most of the rural community centers in the county, there's a Dollar General, there's a gas station, there's some other non-residential developments that we can use as an anchor. We really just didn't see that, along the South 49. So just in summary, those are kind of the changes from the last map to this one. And again, like I said, this is a give and take process. Any other comments or questions that you might have, now would be the time.
I do see that you made the, as far as the parcels that were orange. And, we had that discussion about if they were classified as farms or that sort of thing. I saw where you had made that change from a orange to putting it back to green, so I appreciate that. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think that's just the logical,
Sure.
the logical application in such a rural area.
Yep.
And, as we talked about, even if bona fide farm property is in a different category, that would not change anything at all about their farm operations. And as fact, the state specifically exempts them from these types of regulations. It would only be once they engage in a change of use.
All right.
Sorry.
I have a few points. Since the park's an open space, it doesn't really have any uses, and in the AR district, I haven't checked back with the rural residential. If it's already a land use, why not just go ahead and make an AR and or RR and just let the land use be instead of it being a designated zone for land use district. That's not gonna have any uses listed with it.
Yeah.
Just an observation. I mean, it is what it is. I took a look a couple of weekends ago, looked at all the land use plans for all the communities, and the only one that I saw where they went outside of their ETJ was Elon. And they actually have an area that goes up to the Ospey, looks like Ospey boundary.
Yeah, just south of it.
And I didn't know if that should be suburban transition. I think they have a lot of it, like kind of low density residential, but it may not make a difference. That's just something I noted.
Yeah, it's not really a rectangle, but there's a little white cutout. You got the village of Ospey in white. And I think that's probably a key feature to point out about the map is anything that's white is either incorporated or ETJ and therefore outside of our jurisdiction, other than water bodies, which are also in white. So in the northwestern portion, you've got the village of Ospey, and then there's that small.
This is what the area on their land use plan they're showing being within their, that's the only place Elon could go.
Okay,
But no one else seemed to, and these plans were all different dates.
interesting,
So Elon was the only one that seemed to be going outside of their ETJ.
interesting.
So I don't know if that's worth taking a look at.
I think that's definitely worth taking a look at, yeah.
I mean, but it may be low density residential, rural residential in the county would be fine, and they'd already be correct.
Yeah,
But that's from their growth plan, like projected plan. Gotcha.
yeah, and that may make sense to make it suburban transition because as we talked about and as the 2020 land development plan talks about, those are the areas most likely to be incorporated or have utilities extended, that type of thing.
How far north does that growth plan leads or across the street with them?
Pretty much all the way up to, it includes the high school, pretty much all the way up to the hospital.
Double checking.
And I can definitely reach out to Elon or
It's on their website.
take a look at their website online. Yeah, is this the media?
I need it back. I think I might tear that out.
Make a note.
That's the one and only copy.
Double checking.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think that's worth doing, like the Carolina Mill Village, for example, the primary mill there is technically in the city of Burlington. And so the ultimate, kind of the ideal scenario in my mind would be some type of collaboration where we understand what their future plans are for that area. And we can, you know, accommodate our plans around that and maybe vice versa. And so these are what you want as well. That certainly makes sense.
Don't I remember some conversation about the mill village up there from the historic perspective where some of it's on one side of the road is in Burlington and some stuff on the other side of the road is not in Burlington, and we had to have kind of a joint consensus to,
You mean the Carolina Mill Village?
and I want to think that's the one it was.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
Got Glencoe on here as a mill village.
No, that is as a rural community. Glencoe, the primary Glencoe area is in Burlington's ETJ.
Okay.
But the orange area right outside of it is under county jurisdiction, and that is, labeled as rural community. Do I have that right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, once you kind of get out of the area that is the Glencoe Mill Village, once you're immediately at 5 Points, like the Mill Village vibe is gone. So it didn't make a lot of sense to force some aesthetic considerations on people at 5 Points.
Right.
So we just didn't bother with the mill district there.
So-
It's all,
The historic mill village is in Burlington.
yeah, ETJ.
Okay.
I mean, we'd had some discussion about that area by the lake in Nevin. I don't know. Quite at this point, I don't remember what we've changed and if we want to discuss it further.
Yeah, so that is, there are quite a few parcels there, that are non-residential on the north side of Highway 70 and south of the lake. And then on the revised map, south of, a road that I forgot the name of and is not labeled on here. So that is expanded, that suburban transition area.
South of Highway 70 is suburban transition. And north of Highway 70 is rural residential.
North and south. Do you have the old map?
Probably, yeah. I don't know, you can get.
You have the new map.
Keep up to that.
That's an old map, so you can see the difference there. Okay. You see the difference?
These are not different on my map. I think I've got a medium.
Right there, this area.
It's blue. And then north. of Highway.
Yeah, you don't have it in this.
Oh, no. What you got? You got the number?
I have several copies of the new one. Yeah. Send you guys an agenda packet next time. I'll wait.
Got one.
Wow.
My paper looks like 8.5
Seriously. Not like his performance reviews do, right?
Oh, goodness.
So yeah, that is, to your point at the last meeting, yeah, that area was expanded.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of. There used to be a furniture manufacturer there and a lot of different,
Yeah, and I don't know.
I think
these-
there's a trust company.
Yeah, and another thing too is I don't know the exact layout, but I think there's at least public water.
There is a public water, and there's a water treatment for grain
Along 70, yeah.
that obviously backs up to the water, to the pond, as we used to call it. Not technically a lake, in my opinion.
Not many people know the difference.
I guess it moved when they expanded out to the east. It got a little bit.
There you go.
Oh, I was hoping Mr. Fine would be here because he's in the southwest corner.
Mhm.
And I hadn't been out that way beyond Cedar Rock Park, but when we were talking, I was thinking it might be a good, some along the 49. Some of those crossroads that have stores and stuff, that might be a good little place for a rural community zone.
Yeah, well, and we looked at that. I mentioned that, just a moment ago. We just didn't really see one that logically, suited itself to a rural community. I'm not opposed, I'm certainly not opposed to having one down there. If it makes
There's not a
sense.
Dollar General there yet, that's what you're telling us, right?
Not to my knowledge. Doesn't have to be a Dollar General, yeah, but they are common. Brian, do you want to weigh in on that? Because you and I kind of looked at that
Yeah, we
together.
kind of scrolled through those intersections, and the only one that's close to me was, Friendship Patterson Mill Road in 49, which is immediately southwest of Cedar Rock Park. It's got the old Fair Call store there. I mean, there's a trailer park behind it. I mean, there's something, it's just, I don't know. I don't know that we want to be encouraging growth there anyway, but, I think
Well-
Dollar General is gonna pop up somewhere, and then we may want to consider making that,
So another thing to think about is you go down 49, there are very few lots left on 49. The houses are, the road front houses are kind of there. They're just, on the south side of that intersection you just referenced, they've cleared some lots and you got 2 or 3 new houses going in, but from there down to what is the next one, the Spanish Oak Hill Road? This, and of course, then once you get past that, going down to Russell McPherson and where Henry is, there are some available spaces. I'm saying available, they're not developed yet. But up in that quadrant, it's pretty much already there.
Y'all worried about the, not worried, but predicting the growth in that corner from the Toyota plant. So, we shrunk, or you shrunk the, you expanded the agricultural district, which is good. But you still, I didn't know if it made sense to promote, that's the right word, certain, a little more denser development in that corner because of the Toyota plant impact.
I think the thinking was to have that be, rural residential, then you would accommodate residential lots, but you would still have a little bit larger lot size minimum so that you don't fully lose your rural character. But yeah, if the consensus is that there should be, some type of a high traffic intersection in that area identified and maybe turned into a rural center, rural community. I'm willing to take that advice.
The other option is that you're kind of waiting for, I'll pick up Dollar General, some development to come, and they will come and request rezoning.
Right.
And, then you're not necessarily, then you've got some flexibility on what you do with the surrounding area, but it's just very hard to predict what their metrics are, who's gonna come, where they might go.
I'm cool with it the way it is. I'd lean towards what Mr. Bynes would recommend. That's his neck of the woods, yeah.
I will say this is gonna be probably the hardest thing that we do. Yes. We've got an adopted plan. It's given suggestions on what to do. And then we're trying to match things up. You don't have to go exactly by it, but how do you make the decision where to cut something off, you're trying to predict the future, and none of us can do that.
Very true.
If we get development in the southwest corner, Liberty's right next door. Are they gonna go with water and sewer? If they want water and sewer, Liberty's gonna probably say annex, and they're gonna be annexing. If it's within their area where they can do annexation. That's kind of what we're seeing where I work is they want water and sewer, for the higher density.
Much improved.
The map is not
Yeah.
yet approved. Oh, good, thank you. It was all your suggestions. So I'll give you guys the credit.
Put that as a star on your review coming up.
That's not till October. I mean, the fact that he's thinking about it now, I'm not gonna.
Might be closer than you think.
Yeah.
Special call.
Well, okay.
So, yeah, and, like I said, this is, to me, is still in the draft process. So if you guys have more thoughts about the map between now and the next meeting, there will still be time. All right, regarding the table of uses and the definitions, so, all of the changes here in this document are highlighted in yellow. I did have two members, that reached out, and, had some, thoughts and some feedback. Some of that was incorporated, like, for example, a new line item for home-based businesses and the definition for home-based businesses. And I've also compiled several definitions for terms which were either asked about during the last meeting or they are new terms on the table, like again, the home-based. And those were included in the agenda packet. So, I envision this very much like we did the map at the last meeting. If you guys have made notes, comments, critiques, questions, and you want to share those now, then we can really dig into the table of uses and kind of refine it in the same way that we did the map. There's also kind of a little bit more of an introductory page where, as Tom said, we can't predict the future. So if this is adopted, there's inevitably going to be a use that comes along that doesn't fit neatly in there. And so we would have the ability to interpret that, get something to the applicant in writing. If it worked out, we would proceed. If it didn't work out, they have the option to appeal to the Board of Adjustment. So it just kind of allows for some flexibility and some unforeseen procedure there.
I understand the home-based business, but I don't understand the home-based business.
Okay.
Home-based business is a very broad term
Yes.
that can mean a lot of things. And just on our road alone, there are a variety of what is or used to be home-based businesses.
Yep.
A dog breeder.
Yep.
A dumpster company. My father used to run a construction company out of his house,
Mhm.
but there are also people who nowadays do internet-based
Mhm.
businesses that would also technically follow under that. So you're telling me that in a rural residential district that that's not allowed? That's what this is saying.
Based on what's on the current table of uses, it would not be allowed. If ultimately you guys want to amend that, then I think we can go that route. So,
I'm just thinking out loud here. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
sell on eBay and I
Yeah.
run it out of my house. Is that a home-based business?
that's an excellent question. So let me try to answer your question, kind of give you some insight to my thought process on this. Ultimately, everything that we're doing here is trying to accomplish a couple of goals. We are simultaneously trying to preserve the rural character and what people already love about the county and what's existing. And we're also trying to achieve a little bit of focus and steer businesses in a certain direction. And ultimately that may have a positive economic development output and all the rest. So you have a lot of mechanics, somebody's running a construction business out of their house or their building. They're doing, lawnmower, small engine repair, they might run a beauty salon, they might be cutting hair, there's a real wide variety. And they are out in a rural area on a 5, 10, 20 acre parcel, right? So how do we accommodate them? But we also have rules that say when the Dollar General or the McDonald's or the other bigger guys come into Alamance County, they have to go where we want them to go, right? They're not gonna be out in the country next to the farm. They're gonna go to a higher density area. How do we strike that balance, right? So this is an attempt to strike that balance, but think about the allowance of small engine repair or something like that in the rural residential, where you have, basically you're in the suburbs, right? Where you have houses that are relatively close to each other. So we would be essentially allowing in an otherwise quiet residential only neighborhood a repair shop next to a traditional kind of suburban house. We could allow that. If that's the direction that we ultimately go, we could allow that, but this gets back, I think we've gotten back on several of these issues where in making these decisions, you kind of have to make a tough decision and have a cutoff point. It just says, we've figured out, we have come to the conclusion that we are or are not going to allow certain things in certain places. But it's a very tough balance.
I don't know how you find and where you get into the minutia and the technicality of a home-based business. Say an architect who doesn't have clients or something that does his work out of his house.
Right.
That doesn't disrupt, they're not allowed to be in an employment center or,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer. I'm just asking,
We have a really hard time with this. And
Yeah.
they probably still don't agree, which is
Just blame that guy.
which is
I don't agree. I think, there's so many people in the country that work out of their home, and I don't think they need to ask permission. Just saying.
But on the other hand, I wouldn't want somebody jacking up trucks and so where do you use that?
So I guess one option is there a way we can differentiate these uses and make it different? Because there is a difference between somebody running an embroidery thing in their garage and somebody who's a mechanic or, some other out.
Or a car sells, that sells
Right.
5 cars a year or something,
I mean,
Yeah.
you could have a category of one that's open to the public or certain hours. Appointment only. I don't really know the right answer.
Or the dumpster company that dumps the dumpsters in their yard.
So, yeah, I think you can definitely come up with an example where it makes sense to have it and one where it doesn't.
Could you just make it a special use?
We can put a better rule in place, I'd rather, than put it on the Board of Adjustment, but
And again, I don't have an answers. It's more thought of
Sure.
how it's worded, so that.
Part of it too is, in practical application, let's say somebody's doing architectural design on their computer only and their clients are all over the country and their next door neighbor has no idea that that's going on. Something like that. We're not gonna get a call or a complaint or any kind of a notification. And it might be kind of taboo to say, it's probably the type of thing that's gonna slip under the radar. Somebody's painting cars in the side of their yard or,
Yeah.
they're generating noise from their home-based business. We would be alerted. That's where these types of regulations would catch.
Breeding 15 dogs and.
Sure, could be that.
Yeah.
So the way I've traditionally seen this is home-based businesses usually aren't in the permitted use table, are considered an accessory use. So, and you would have, they're governed by a set of performance standards. You can't generate X amount of traffic in any day. You have so many people come in and you issue a permit based on that. Where it does get sticky is when you have the guy that's gonna operate out of an accessory building. I have seen places where you separate, you could make that a special use, that type, but if you're doing something in your home, like a lady that cuts hair and she's only gonna see, or only sees, a few customers a day, That's allowable with a home occupation permit.
Mhm.
These are the rules. You have to go down. Does it fit the definition? If it's somebody that doesn't have customers coming to their house and they're just doing stuff on the internet, it's not really they're working from home or telecommuting or whatever you want to call it. They don't generate, you wouldn't know that any business was.
Was there, it was being conducted.
That's the whole point of a home-based business regulations is you wouldn't know a business was there. Some places won't even let you put out a sign. Some places will. You can write out how big the sign can be, how tall it can be. So there are ways around it, but I mean, I usually, you would consider those an accessory use, not a principal use of the property. The principal use is the house. The accessory use is what is the minor activity that goes on.
Can we add language to specifically exclude?
Yes.
Like a office, I work from home office, a home office, like that's not what we're talking about here.
You can specify things that are not permitted as home occupation
Yeah.
in those rules.
Well, some of it, and where Amy's talking about from the back door out is county.
Yeah.
And it's and then there's also, you've got to think about grandfathered in. If that business has been there 10, 15, 20 years, you can't come in and say you can't have this business.
Right.
And a third of your home can be a business. You don't want a lot of traffic and you wouldn't allow that, but a third of your home can be a business.
When you say a third, is that like a state or federal kind of tax?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because we looked into that one time before with a complaint. And they said, well, a third of your residents can be used. Now, you can make it where you can't have cars coming and going and, noise and all that stuff. And then there's also grandfathered in, which, means you can do anything with it.
Well, I think, Tom, like what you were saying about the accessory use and some of the metrics used to outline those uses, like trip generation, right? Could we also use metrics such as sound or noise generation, or
Yeah.
visual intensity, like 10 dumpsters sitting in the front yard, something like that, or nuisance animals,
Most
nuisance
places
animals.
would allow you to have a kennel.
Yeah.
Or something like that as a home
Right.
occupation.
But if we could look at some of those metrics, maybe to define the bounds, that way you're not limiting the potential uses, but you're a limit or kind of defining what those uses or potential possibilities would generate or
Yeah.
create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Features.
And we did
Characteristics,
change so that they cannot have the dog breeding
Mhm.
place.
Yeah.
Then it's limited to, if you have an acre, it's 3 dogs. If you have less than an acre, it's 2.
So a thought on verbiage here could be, is it open to the public?
Mhm.
Are you required to have a handicap parking? And if the business, in other words, if you get to the point where you have a designated handicap parking spot that's van accessible,
Yeah.
or you don't, and it's not open to the public, you could phrase your verbiage up that way.
Yeah, because that would put them into the other category or just over the threshold.
That's right.
So that'd be one for inspections, I guess, at what point,
Yeah.
when someone gets into, let's say they're running a beauty shop, out of a room in their house.
Yeah.
When do those ADA requirements come in where you're gonna have to have an accessible bathroom, a ramp?
All those things. It can be a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is coming from when, I don't know, is this gonna have like an accessory use section? So we're not looking at the whole thing, we're kind of easing our way into it, so I don't know what the full structure is gonna be.
Yeah. When you say accessory use, you mean like the home-based business being an accessory to the
Yeah.
principal.
A shed.
Yeah, I mean, that's more or less part of the definition. I haven't thought about, I don't have drafted up in the full ordinance, an accessory.
Okay,
And part of that is just,
well, no, it's gonna fit in here, so it
right,
can't take up so much space.
right, yeah, exactly. Well, part of that is just what is routine and customary for different types of developments, you know. There's already language in the UDO about accessory uses for residential properties. But I think it's definitely something we could take a closer look at. I think it's an excellent point.
So what about if we make home-based businesses in rural residential and suburban transition? What if we make those either special use or permitted with additional regulations, and have you draft up some criteria that would help make that determination for next meeting?
So allow it in the suburban transition?
Well,
Mhm.
allow it in both of those with regulations, so that we can allow the Avon lady and not allow,
The dog kennel.
the dog. Yeah.
I don't mean to be picking on the dogs. I mean,
You say cat kennel.
You brought it up, you brought it up, so it's stuck now.
the dogs I'm talking about didn't bother me. They bothered somebody else.
Well, I think the car lot's a great example. I mean, how many guys out in the county have 9 cars in their yard? I got you.
The mechanic, and it doesn't bother me, the mechanic fixes the cars, it's the ones he can't fix and he waits on the parts for a year. And, you know,
You mean the ones you have to bush hog
the
to find?
forklifts that sit there and you gotta bush hog around, them, you know,
The people with.
The grass growing up around the lawnmower is my favorite.
yeah.
Like, yeah,
Mow around the mower.
right, right.
I mean, not that there was ever, you know, not that there's one of those right now on Graham Road, between Graham and Hall River or anything, but it's tucked away behind trees or out Willie Pace Road or Holyfield.
So Brian, if you don't mind, repeat your thoughts there about allowing home-based businesses in suburban transition, but maybe make it a special use permit?
Yeah, so both those districts, I'm thinking suburban transition and rural residential. That we would change those from not allowed to allowed for special use.
Mhm.
And that we would create a set of criteria that would allow staff to determine whether that should be allowed there.
Okay.
And I'm putting that burden on you to come up with a set of criteria for us to toss around next meeting. Somebody's done this. We can find it. Copy somebody else.
Actually, I looked on Trongwood Road, 45 or 50 years ago when they annexed and ran water and sewer. They gave them the option of coming into the city limits or not. And there's a place out there with a workshop garage that has a lot of lawnmowers sitting out there and he mows around it and it's tall grass around but he's in the county.
Those things do not run. There's.
Right, they don't run.
Still there?
But he's an ETJ, isn't he?
He's, but, you know, he used to not even mow and he finally consented to mow it, but.
He's gonna need one of those for parts one day. Really?
And strangely enough, about 3 doors up from him, of course, he's dead now, but Hugh Clark used to live there and had an automatic transmission shop behind his house.
Yeah, know who you're talking about.
But if you weren't invited in there, you'd never know.
Mhm.
Because from the road, there was a time when there was a transmission hanging in the post out there. But that was the only giveaway.
Mhm.
It could have just been art.
Would that constitute a signage now?
That's what I was actually looking at. the signage.
Yeah.
I mean, what if we have someone who has a massage parlor in their house and they have flashing neon?
Well,
Yeah.
one would be inside the home, the other would be an accessory structure. So what about a different term? And what I was telling him is another term of art that I've seen used in the past is a customary home occupation, which is designed for nail salon, beauty salon, accountant, tax services inside the home. But the home-based business would be outside the home, in the garage, in the accessory building, something like that. It would make a difference that way, and then we have regulations that flow between the two. Thoughts on that?
And what was that term, customary?
Customary home occupation.
They'll talk about buffers, that if they do have something and it's really unattractive in the neighborhood, to have some kind of buffer zone up to possibly hide it,
Yeah.
be able to screen it.
I mean, if my neighbor's got a massage bar, I don't care if it's in the living room or in a side building. Really, I mean, it's about the use
Sure.
for me, as opposed to where it happens. I'm sure that,
Well,
there's another scenario where that makes sense. I'm just, can't think of it right now.
Well, we can still have certain criteria for like when they would need to come through TRC, get a NCDOT driveway permit, you know, get the ADA ramp, apply with certain aspects of the building permit. We could still have that. I think it might, I'm just kind of thinking it may be easier to separate it between in the home versus in an accessory building on the same property. Maybe it won't be. I'm just kind of thinking.
I just think it needs some more thought, and I don't know the answer, or that we'll have the answer tonight, but I think it needs some more.
We don't
Well, this
know what
conversation is
it
good, and he
Yeah.
said we weren't voting tonight anyway, so.
Yeah.
Obviously, paint cars or work on.
You would need some massage. If we talk about massage.
Take your brains out to his neighbor.
Interesting, yeah. But part of this is, I mean, we have properties that are so large and rural, you know.
That nobody, it's
Nobody-
not a bother.
And it's not a nuisance, you know, you got 20, 30 acres or whatever, and you got a bunch of tractor parks or something out there, it's just not really a nuisance.
Right.
But if you're on 1 acre, with all your tractor parks and batteries and engines and
A little
whatever,
different.
it's a little different.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on the table of uses? We spent a lot of time on one item.
Well, I mean, I will bring up that I don't know this. I don't I'm talking about the dogs again, but there is a home-based kennel in McIntosh on the Lake that runs on about 500 dogs a year.
Wow.
Dang.
And you wouldn't know it, but is that what you want as your neighbor? They just run 4 or 5 litters every heat cycle, and they roll
Wow.
$2,000 or $3,000 dogs out. And yeah, is that what you want in certain areas? So you have to have
Mhm.
some way of, you know, I can't imagine what their neighbors have to say
Yeah.
when you get 5 litters at a time barking, you know, there's not enough insulation in the garage, you know,
Yeah.
can't be, right?
Hmm.
So I just said it requires more thought. But I guess in the agriculture areas, we can have 500 dogs and, you know, don't.
But less of a nuisance. out there.
Well, in them agricultural areas, if you got 500 dogs, it would behoove you to keep them at your place.
Yes. Well, at $2,500 a puppy, it would behoove you to keep them at your place anyway,
Well,
right?
there's that.
Yeah. That's that.
Oh, yeah.
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 Wow.
Yeah, I imagine this won't be the last conversation we have about uses.
Yeah.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
If we adopt this, I'll probably get calls every day about uses.
Mhm.
You need more reasons for your phone to ring, don't you?
What's that?
I say you need more reasons for your phone to ring, don't
That's
you?
right. That's exactly right.
Would you best to carry these by category, look at them by categories, we go down?
Certainly, yeah.
This time.
Absolutely. If you'd like, we certainly can start at the top and kind of work our way down. So yeah, there at the top with residential uses, this was actually a request of Max to create a different split off for triplexes and fourplexes. Put those in those categories. I think it should be noted too. I know I mentioned this at the last meeting, but I think it's worth completing, just so we're all on the same page. When you see the additional regulations column over there, mostly, virtually only in the rural communities and the mill villages, would we eventually have some type of pedestrian connection. As you build out those small communities, you have a greater need for sidewalk, park and ride, those types of features. So if you see that there, that's a very, very long-term thought process for what future pedestrian connections would look like. Section 5.5 would be the form-based elements or the appearance requirements for the mill villages, where the new developments can come in, but they have to look like the existing structures that are there. They have to have that kind of historic and industrial aesthetic to them. Would not apply to houses. It would only apply to non-residential development. But wherever you see section 5.5, that's what that's going to be.
Well, I couldn't find section 5.5 when I was looking through it. It was gone, so it wasn't there.
Yeah, it's in draft.
Okay.
If all goes according to plan, you'll get it at the next meeting.
Okay, so in the residential uses, I have to question a couple of things in that.
Mhm.
The cluster subdivisions for, ag area,
Mhm.
I would mark that as an X. And I would also mark an X manufactured home park, I would personally mark with X.
Okay.
Now, we spent a lot of time on that one subject. I don't think we could spend that much time on everything else, but these are some of the things, well, you got a copy of it. We discussed it on the phone. I don't know whether you want to tackle that here or maybe some other time or place. I don't know. I don't know what the time limit's going to be.
Now's a good time to do it.
And I may be all by myself on this. I don't know.
Let me say something about the cluster. I'm just gonna use generic numbers. We got a 2 acre lot minimum. You got 40 acres of land. So the math says you can put 20 houses on that 40 acres of land, 2 acres apiece. If you cluster the houses and you put 20 acres on a half acre apiece, you put 20 houses on 10 acres. So as a result of that, you've got a 30 acre non-developed open space. You following the numbers? Okay. So when we're talking about clustering, that's what that means. You've got the number of units that the parcel would allow. You've put them in a place, and then you've got the balance that remains open. Does that help?
I understand that. I just don't see it as suitable for agriculture district.
Well, I'm not arguing that point. I'm in agreement with you. I'm offering that from the perspective of there's been a lot of time spent trying to figure out some alternatives to allow for some development without putting a house on every 2 acre parcel in the 40 acre farm. And that was one. And of course, that comes with some special rules. You got to have suitable septic, you got to have wells, you got to have a whole bunch of things, plus this balance of open space that's undeveloped. So I'm not offering that for argument on no level. I'm just offering it for context as to what that is. And if the decision of this board is to recommend no clustering, I'm in. I just offer us to kind of how that come about, because there's been some time spent on it.
Henry, how would you feel about it if, that acreage that has to be preserved is like prime farmland? So someone could do farming activities, it's like forest, protecting forested land. You've got field and you've got forest and stuff, and you still have that view. And maybe if you can put those houses in there, don't just totally obliterate that. Would that change your opinion? I think of allowing it.
I guess my view or definition of cluster subdivision is one that's, the ones that I've been exposed to. And, I'm not gonna change my mind.
We're not asking you to.
Yeah.
And let me be the one to say, historically, when we use the term cluster, it is not in a positive connotation. So that right there sheds some light on Mr. Paisley. If you're still listening, that was for you. So there we go with, we understand. We're just offering this for context, if you will.
Yeah.
So. All right.
Part of what we're dealing with right now is the current subdivision ordinance allows for cluster subdivisions, but does not require any open space at all. So hypothetically, a developer could come in and create very small lots, and there's absolutely no requirement that they preserve a stand of trees or a natural area that's close to a stream other than the buffers, obviously we have to enforce or those types of features. So at some base level, we have to at least address that in a way that puts a little more shape to cluster subdivision as an option. One of the reasons I think we reached that as a compromise when we were going back and forth so much about lot sizes is it would to me, it would be a good compromise and work in a couple of different directions. It would allow the developer to exercise options above a more rigid minimum lot size threshold, where you have to do only these minimum lot sizes and there's really nothing else. But from the county's perspective, it might also preserve the farmland like Tom was talking about. Or maybe you orient it in a way that it is the preserved area is right along the existing highway or state maintained road. And then the neighborhood is inside beyond that. So the average person driving by doesn't even know that that's been developed and there's a whole new neighborhood back there. They just see the trees or the park or the trails or whatever that are part of the overall development. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's part of our conversation was the clusters are a way to compromise to achieve some flexibility in the development, but also achieve the county's goals of preserving rural and natural areas.
You are correct. It's not a requirement. It's not suggested. It's an option. That's where that is.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think you can make an informed decision on that without having the other part of it in your other hand, looking at it.
Well, I tried, you know, I looked at this thing, tried to look at the ordinance and I couldn't find some things. I actually worked on this a lot.
Yeah.
I have a lot of exceptions, and maybe this is not the time to go over those exceptions. Maybe I should look at it again, whatever is a recommendation by Matthew and Rodney.
If you got something on your mind, this is the time to talk about it.
Well, I understand, but,
Yeah.
you know, I did spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
I do have some exceptions, but I don't know that I'm always right on this. Maybe I should look at something else. Maybe I missed something.
Right, I mean, but we have to see the final description of what the cluster subdivision is gonna look like, in my opinion. Before you can definitely say yay or nay.
That's true. So what I have in my mind may not be the same things in your mind at the same term.
There you
It
go.
may
I
not
agree with
be.
that. I totally understand that.
That's right.
It may not be. You know,
And
when I
this
see cluster
discussion is what
subdivision,
brings
There's
that.
something in our UDO that allows you to lower the lot size with community water and sewer.
Mhm.
And that's not part of the cluster subdivision, right? That's just part of the
That's
lot
just matter of
size
fact, yeah.
description as it is currently defined.
Correct, yeah.
So,
Like I said, the current ordinance allows for cluster subdivisions,
Yeah.
but there's no requirement at all for preservation of open space.
so I'm opposed,
So it's-
I would not, you know, I don't want to say the word opposed, that's a strong word, but I would think a cluster subdivision, I think has to have.
Sure.
Corresponding undeveloped land.
Well, I think what's fascinating too, I mean, this is maybe me being a little too pie in the sky, but let's say you live in that type of a neighborhood, 5, 10, whatever years down the road, you know, to me, you're more growing up in a community, you're living in a community that has defined, you know, unique features and a personality. The future residents of that neighborhood will say, I love that we can walk to the park, or my kids can play on the playground, or we've got this natural area and trails right here in walking distance from the house, as opposed to a lot of what we see now is just like driveway, right on an existing road where people are speeding through there 60, 65 miles per hour.
Yep.
Again, they got a little pie in the sky about that, but I think that those are some of the benefits of adding some shape and some texture to these types of regulations. Also, there's a definition of cluster subdivision in the definitions that I included in the agenda packet.
In this one here?
Yes.
I just think that preservation of open space in the rural areas is what I think, would like to achieve, because I think that's what we all agree on, is we want to preserve that character out there. And so, you know, whatever achieves that, that's what I would want to support. Sprawl is not, it's not going to preserve the rural character. Giving up the land house by house.
I will say, cluster subdivision, it's historic, it's been around since at least the sixties. The new term is usually conservation subdivision. And, there's been several books written on that. Kind of in this, one of the things I had about this, I noticed that this was listed as a use, but conventional subdivision wasn't. So the subdivision is a subdivision. You know, and maybe one is allowed in a different way than another.
So Matthew, would you agree or disagree with the definition of your cluster subdivision? Does it agree or disagree with your agricultural district wording? I say it disagrees. Do you say it agrees or disagrees?
I think it definitely agrees.
How do you see that? Because agricultural district says, primarily used for structures regulated under the North Carolina Residential Code, bona fide farms, agricultural operations, and uses that are supplemental agricultural operations. That does not, I don't see, my interpretation of those words do not correspond with the cluster subdivision.
Sure. Okay, I understand. Yeah, I understand the point. So I wouldn't say that it agrees in the sense that the residents of those properties in the cluster subdivision are all going to be farming. But I think that the end product of the development is more conducive to the general area than a traditional subdivision.
Would it not be more conducive to a rural residential or rural community?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, to me, it makes more sense to, a lot of this to me goes back to density as opposed to use per se. So yes, we want to encourage density in the rural communities, for example. So,
And that's where I see this particular conversation coming more into play is when we get into the allowed densities within these districts. That's where this really come out and stuff.
I don't think that a cluster subdivision at a higher density is appropriate in agriculture. As the same density as in the rural, like you're saying, it,
sure.
in my mind, I agree, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And how do you differentiate between those?
No, I think that's an excellent point. Brian and I actually talked about this, I think last week, of maybe having like a sliding scale. So if you're doing a cluster subdivision in the ag district, for example, your required open space would be on the higher end, 30%, just
a number.
30%. Then you move to rural residential and you're down to 20%. Then you move to rural
That
center.
would be helpful.
And you're down to like 5 or 10%. So you are encouraging density as you go through the different areas where this plan wants to see.
As you say, you want your density to be not in residential density, not in the agricultural areas.
Is the ag a 5 acre minimum? Is that the recommendation?
Tentatively, that's the number we're talking about. Yep.
Then that's, yeah, if it goes down to 2, then not allowing clusters, it would eat up the ag.
I think that's an excellent point. I mean, a lot of this is compromise too,
So hopefully we can get.
I don't think-
5 acre minimum.
Yeah, I don't think there's an appetite to shut down development. I think there's an appetite to better manage development. And a compromise like a cluster subdivision option to me is a good way to go. Next section is residential uses and group living.
Well, we didn't cover the mobile home park.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So, and again, I'm gonna ask the board, this is how we're gonna handle this. It can take up a lot of time, so I don't know. So, you got it down here as a PA, and I would think that it would be an X for agricultural.
I understand what you're saying now. I don't think I got it all the first time, but I agree with you. The clusters and mobile home parks need to be an X in the agricultural district. Yep. That's my opinion.
That's mine as well.
Yeah, okay. Since we're not voting on anything tonight, but everybody gets an opinion. But I understand what you're saying, and I understand that.
So if I can, I'll just give you a little bit of insight into my thinking on that. So legally, jurisdictions have to allow mobile home parks somewhere in some district, correct? Now, obviously, they're there in 3. part of my thinking on this was, there is, whether we're talking about traditional homes or manufactured homes, a lot of times we have these conversations, it does come back to affordability, right, for housing stock in the county. Manufactured homes are a much more affordable option for people than traditional homes. There's also a lot of land area in the county that would be in ag districts. And maybe there's we haven't gotten into this yet, but maybe there's an option to have some type of a buffer or open space in a manufactured home park, similar to the cluster subdivisions, if we wanted to go that route. I'm not trying to push back. If the will of the board is to change it, I'm okay with that. I'm just wanting to give you my insight into my thinking on why my draft here has it allowed in the agricultural purpose.
Well, if you have it in there as a PA, what would be the options?
Yeah, the reason it's A for additional regulations is there's already a manufactured home park ordinance in Article 6, Part 7.
I read a little bit of that. It really, I still, after I read that, I still felt that should be an extra agricultural district.
Okay.
I agree.
How many manufactured home park plans does the county see on average, or since you've been here? I know you can't answer.
I don't think we've received any new manufactured home park plans since I've been here. We've had a few RV park plans.
Yeah, as far as just like new, just manufactured home park plants out.
I don't recall.
Not very long.
You know, a mobile home park is obviously very different than allowing mobile homes in the ag district as a single family residence. A park is. I agree with you, I just don't think. Yes. That's my opinion.
Well, okay, so if you're in the ag district and you got a 5-acre lot minimum, not gonna develop many mobile home parks on that scale. Isn't that correct?
That is true. That one question we would have to ask ourselves then is, are the minimum lot regulations of the mobile home park gonna flow exactly with the new lot minimums of the subdivision ordinance, for example? Right now, it's a 1-to-1 match.
Well, I guess where I'm going, grandpa still owns the farm, still farms the farm. Granddaughter gets married and he goes over here in the corner and cuts her all 5 or 8 or 10 acres. And they put a mobile home in, live in it 4 or 5 years, build a house. That's the way things go out of the county some. Now, that's one thing. When you think about a mobile home park, you think about multiple mobile homes right here on the same parcel. And it wouldn't be feasible to develop a farm and put mobile homes in on 5-acre lots. Isn't that correct, Mr. Morgan?
It's a big lot for anything.
So that right there may shed some light on this if it all comes up like it's on paper today.
Basically, we could have a situation where the mobile home park ordinance mirrors the subdivision ordinance in that the minimum lot sizes are the same. Or we could say the mobile home park ordinance is basically gonna stay as it is with like, basically a 30,000 square foot minimum per mobile home. And that would be different than the lot size minimum for a traditional subdivision.
In my opinion, if it stays the way it is, then I agree with.
So it's
I
a
mean,
good
you're allowing it
question.
in the rural residential,
Yeah,
but in ag, it's just a different animal.
Yeah.
or the next couple miles would be special use.
Right. And that is an option.
Guess I'm not seeing a big difference between a triplex and a fourplex and a manufactured home park from a density perspective, right? I mean, they're obviously gotta be different costs, but I'm struggling to remember why we would disallow a fourplex and allow a manufactured home park.
Yeah.
And if you had a might call them quadruplex, and it's a 5-acre.
Isn't that a muscle group?
Yeah, I guess. Wouldn't the density get that too? You'd have to have 20 acres to put a quadruplex or fourplex on a piece of property, or how would that work?
Yeah, then that's an excellent question. Part of the draft that I think we have in the subdivision ordinance, which again, hopefully you'll see next week, is it kind of extrapolates up a little bit. So you wouldn't need a full scale, like duplex, for example, you would need a full like 2 acres. You would need like 1.5 acres.
Yeah,
Or triplex, you need a little bit more. So there are levels that go up, but they don't specifically require a full scale lot increase.
one of the things does anyone have any else?
I just wanted, so when I make this edit, we're gonna remove mobile home parks from the ag district. Is that basically the consensus?
It's all right with me.
Absolutely. Just so you know,
Okay, I know how you feel about it.
just want to be clear.
Okay.
Everybody's looking at me.
Your turn.
I don't know, I just think. I just go back to, I mean, I know we're trying to preserve rural character and all those kind of things, but I just have I know there's a need for affordable housing. And that's a lot of green space to not allow that type of use. I get the opinions and the thoughts. I understand that point of view too, but I don't know, rather than just disallowing it completely, could we do like a sliding scale or, have some element of the mobile home ordinance mirror some of those things like for the cluster subdivision maybe, because, is it a single family home stick built? No, it's a manufactured building, but the use and intensity still, I would think, apply to both, regardless of the structure.
Yeah.
So that's just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's options, right? We can make an exception that where the lot size doesn't exactly correspond to the subdivision regulations. We can do a special use permit. I mean, there's options for sure. Buffering.
Yeah. I mean, it is there, like you said, with the PA for additional regulation or additional measures, right? I don't know, maybe before nixing it completely, maybe we could explore other possibilities, and if there's no agreement there, then take that step maybe. So.
I understand what you're saying, but I think you might be outvoted on
I
this.
probably, if there's a vote, yep, I know. I've been in that minority before, so that's all right.
We all have.
Yep. So, like Rodney said, everybody has an opinion and that's what it's fine.
All right.
If everybody on this board had the same opinion, the board would be ineffective.
That's right.
I see a scenario where a manufactured home park could be in an agriculture area. And I would be more for special use where you have some regulation and some, I mean, but there's not a plethora of mobile home parks in the county because of the unavailability of water and sewer. Correct?
That is correct.
I didn't understand.
I would say you're not, because you don't have water and sewer available, it's not as economically feasible to put in a home park in the county as it would be if you had water and sewer.
That's true.
Because no matter what we set the lot size, you still have to live with the regulations of environmental health and the spacing of the well to the, and you have to have, unless you're having a community well.
Right.
Or a community.
It gets tricky on out there in the country. I don't think folks has to really worry about a big run on the agricultural district, mobile home parks invading the place. And affordability of housing is important in the neighborhood because most of the folks that's living around here ain't gonna be able to live on 5 acre lot.
Yeah.
They're gonna be lucky to afford 2 acre lots. So I know what
Yeah.
the big plan is here, but I mean, the folks ain't gonna be able to afford it. You're gonna have to give them some kind of option. I mean, that wasn't asked for, but there's your opinion from one person, your peanut gallery. Just saying, hey,
Yeah.
We need.
I think it's stretching out there a little ways for,
Yeah.
folks ain't gonna be able to afford these lots.
Well, that's what,
And
you know,
it
like I
just
mentioned,
depends on what you're trying to do.
yeah. That's why I said I think it's a lot of green just to say no,
Yeah.
you know,
I don't think you gotta run on it,
you know.
and
It's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Next.
Next category is the residential uses in group living. So, this one I actually paid particular attention to, and you had several questions about it. So we do now have definitions for adult care home and nursing home. I changed the terminology to family care home because that exactly mirrors the general statute.
Yeah, what I understand from that is for 6 people or less. That's what Best Bond.
I think that's correct, yeah. Yeah, and then, you also see definitions for retirement homes and rehabilitation centers. But nothing about the allowance has changed.
By pointing to the additional regulations, by pointing to the general statute, or you looking at doing the half-mile separation? Because that's the main regulation in there, is that local governments are allowed to require a half-mile separation.
No, I
between
hadn't.
them.
I hadn't thought about putting that in there.
So it may not be worth pointing back to the statute.
Yeah. That's a good point. No, that's kind of a placeholder to remind myself of where those regulations come from.
Half-mile separation between the family care home and what?
Another family care home, I'm sorry, yeah,
Okay.
keeping them separate,
Okay.
it keeps them from, I think it'd be.
So we can't have a
more important in town
cluster of.
Where
yeah.
somebody buys an entire block of houses.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
starts operating license. And I have seen where that has happened once. We have a whole neighborhood that's got like 3 or 4
Wow.
that are set up.
And the things would be grandfathered in by this definition. There will be some that are in some of your green areas.
Yeah,
I'm sure they're probably.
yeah. Anything that's existing. So, the general statutes require that you treat family care homes the same as traditional residential development. So anywhere a single family residential development is allowed, you'll see a mirror image of, the family care homes. I hadn't really thought about the half-mile separation. If that's something the board is interested in, we can take a look at that. We would be interested in that.
That already in the state stuff, or is that?
Yeah.
I don't think
And
that's
it's up
changed.
to a half-mile, right?
Yeah, that's a half-mile separation. I think that's the maximum. You can't go. I don't think you can go
A
further.
local government may prohibit a family care home from being located within a 1/2 mile radius of an existing family care home.
And the state keeps there's a listing, you can go by county and find the addresses of where they are, so you could do a spot map and find where
Wow.
those are. And then
Such
that's
that base
the
existence.
problem I've always ran into when I have dealt with this past. I'm not a big fan of half-mile separation, but,
I actually live right next door to one of these in my neighborhood and, yeah,
you need to keep an up-to-date map.
very quiet.
You're not in favor of Tommy should shoot more or less.
I'm just not, the half-mile separation, just keeping up with it is administratively difficult, and you don't get many applications for them. I would think it would be a bigger problem in town, in a county. That's where I saw it the most, is working with town.
Yeah.
But it's there, you know, it's
It
not
was a
gonna
good
hurt anything. It's just something, when the permit comes in, staff's gotta do that check to make sure there's not one. Half-mile existence. And
Yeah.
keep that map up to date.
Yeah.
And then what happens when it shuts down, and then you never know about that.
Right.
It can just be tricky.
Mhm.
And if you ask the applicant to do it, there won't be one within 100 miles. So,
Yeah.
No changes to the next section and agricultural animal related uses. Or the next section, or the next section. If y'all have any questions or comments on those.
Back to the retirement home, I was
Yeah.
gonna say the definitions uses center. I don't know if you wanna
Oh.
just make them home or center,
Yeah.
whichever.
But that family care home is what we would still refer to as a long-term care facility. Is that correct? Like one in Ralph Scott houses?
Yeah, I think most of them, family care are longer term
Okay.
care facilities.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people that are there for a long time.
We're using specific examples, but I would think Ralph Scott care homes or the family care homes or versus the retirement centers
Mhm.
or what.
Would be shorter term. Maybe.
Maybe, maybe not, yeah.
Well, and you referenced a while ago, and there's some of us here old enough to remember the county home.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
I think it's gonna depend on the number of residents. So the cap in terms of the family care home is 6
Six.
residents.
Mhm.
And it's in a typical traditional residential environment. So if it's like a center with a nursing staff or cafeteria or something like that, it's obviously not a family care home. Family care home is more, we got an available single family residence, we're gonna have some folks live there, we need a little bit of assistance. Mental or physical disabilities, no more than 6.
It's usually a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, looks
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
like the rest of the neighborhood,
Yeah.
except it may have a ramp or.
Right. So. Any interest in, well, we talked about a possible separation, up to half-mile separation and all the challenges that come along with that. Didn't sound like there was a consensus for that, but
I like the idea.
in any
Absolute
particular,
separation.
in any particular district.
Be any district that's permitted,
Yeah,
just my opinion.
I think it would probably apply if you're gonna do it in one district, why wouldn't you do it in any other?
Yeah. Well, I mean, places are gonna be unique, right? If you're going for a 5 acre minimum in the ag district, your next door neighbor is not really next door. So does it cause any issues or cause conflict between the neighbors? Not as likely if you're in close proximity.
I don't think I understand your question. So you just say it is the 5 acre if it is. So your question is, if you have a family care home in one part, and you're saying you could have it's going to be more, it won't be on the next lot, 5 acres. It'd be maybe the next one.
Well,
I'm trying to understand your question.
my hypothetical example is this goes into effect and eventually we have 5 acre minimums, out in the ag areas. Lot A is a family care home. Lot B is a traditional nuclear just a nuclear family. If
I
they,
think could very well be, I don't think.
could be another family care home, but in terms of what's the need for the separation, right? That the general statutes give local governments an exercise. I would assume the need for the separation might be additional noise, additional traffic.
Well, I don't know what it may be, but for my interpretation of it would be, if you have it side by side, it'd be the same thing as assisted living homes. I mean, it would be, and that's not what we want in a rural, in a ag district. But having a family care home is beneficial to have in certain places, in certain segments. If you reduced it, I'm afraid it would just be one after the other. I mean, it's what I wouldn't want that because it'd be assisted living.
So that idea is that they might cluster in a particular area.
You wouldn't want to cluster.
And,
Right.
the lot may be a half acre lot in the ag district. There could be multiple half acre lots, but
Is there any written in the regulatory language for licensing those things as to the proximity between them?
Licensed by the state.
Now, I know they have to be licensed, but I'm saying, can you get a CON and then a CON and it's within two blocks? Is there anything in that the DFS puts out that I don't know the answer to that question. Ask.
I think they have to comply with wherever they're located. You know, they're licensed, but then they have to, in addition to that, comply with whatever, locality that they're in.
But I didn't know if there was anything that said that they can't be
Like 3 in a row.
proximity to the net. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think so.
I think so.
I don't know.
And I think that's
So
why they put that.
where are you measuring a half a mile mark from?
Well, that's another good question. And to me, Ronnie, it'd be down a road. I know as crow flies, it can be different things, but this is my interpretation would be road frontage, going down the road.
Well,
I think we would have to set it because the statute isn't really clear. It just says a half mile. Is that from the?
And what, within a one half mile
building? Is it from the
radius.
property line?
A radius.
Half mile radius.
Yeah.
Of the front door, a radius of the corner of the edge of the property, a radius of the back edge of the property,
Good question.
radius.
Would be the radius of the center of the city, I would say.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a half mile local government. You figure it out.
Right.
Where you want to measure
Determine your
from the
half
property
mile, yeah.
line.
And do we, I don't know that we have any flexibility in that. Would it have to be a half mile? Or
I
could we
think
say-
what he said it was, it couldn't be more than half,
Yeah.
could be up to a
A
half.
local
mile.
government may prohibit a family care home from being located within a half mile radius of an existing family care home.
So it's been beyond that.
So local government's gonna do half mile or nothing. Is that the proper reading of that?
I think the idea, yeah, is they want, you can have them be you can put that regulation in that they can be up to a half mile.
But what if we said like
Okay.
100 yards? 200 yards,
You could probably be less restricted. But that's when the problems come in. When I was at the city, that was some of the problems. They took out the half mile restriction. Homes started popping up in residences, people got complaints. It's because it's not just, incapacitated individuals. Sometimes there's mental health issues, there's police calls, they'll
Yeah.
leave the property. So we would get calls, the police would get calls. So then if you have them separated at least a half mile, then, you know, you're kind of lessening the whole effect in the whole neighborhood.
Sounds like we need the half mile.
Yeah.
You don't want too many crazies with the certain spot. Is that what we're-
We got enough out there already.
Pardon my lack of political correctness.
This is being recorded, remember?
I understand. It wouldn't be the first time I said something and heard back from him.
I'm gonna let Mr. Paisley slide on this one.
I figured you would.
All right.
Half a mile minimum in this meeting.
Institutional uses, community and government services. The only changes there are permissive for the rural residential and suburban transition.
I was gonna ask about the agricultural and animal.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Wouldn't those all be potentially bona fide farm uses? I mean-
Yes. A sawmill, not
Yeah,
explicitly.
not a sawmill. Well, yeah, but
Uh,
there's one
and
above that.
an equestrian facility, I'm actually not sure. And I've actually
I
done.
think more like a farm, community garden, urban agriculture, forestry, garden center, greenhouse
Yes.
nursery.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's. It might be better just to say bona fide farm activities, refer to the statute. And
Yeah. Are you talking about not allowing?
no, I'm just saying that these are already. I don't know what the permission is gonna be that's given once this gets adopted, or are they gonna have to get us some type of.
Well, P is permitted by right.
Yeah.
P is permitted by right. So, in a lot of cases,
But
it's single.
if they're exempt, they're exempt. I guess I'm just. This makes it look like they're a regulated use. but
Right.
The county statute says it's
Are you thinking about
And are they gonna have to get,
hog farms?
hog farms are regulated under a separate statute.
Okay,
They have some regulations.
And don't we still have a state moratorium on them things?
they need a lot of regulation. Water quality, getting into the water.
Matthew, I'm just saying, I
But your
guess it's
basic
fine to
farm
look in there,
animals.
but
Yeah,
if it's exempt, most places just,
just don't even.
yeah, you put
Yeah.
a statement in the bona fide farming activities under X statute or exempt from these regulations, and you just, when something comes in, you have to evaluate it.
Yeah,
And that might just be how it's presented.
sure.
But we've got an X for community garden, urban agriculture in the EC district, and if it's deemed a bona fide farm use, then it has to be allowed.
Sure.
So maybe it would be safer to not list it out.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And urban agriculture, I mean, that's like roof gardens and things like that. One thing why wouldn't we allow that, like a company wanted to do a rooftop garden
Yeah,
or something?
yeah, that's a good point. You know, I don't foresee any residential in the employment centers. And so there may not be any community gardens or urban agriculture that follows from that, but I totally get your point.
I guess some of the items in the agricultural and animal related uses, the support service, sawmill, yeah, I know what you're saying. Grain storage facility, I don't think an equestrian facility may fall under bona fide use, but it could potentially with the way the statute's written.
Yeah, well, horses are unique because you typically don't get any agricultural product from a horse. Obviously, they're similar to livestock, but there's no
I'm thinking
meat, there's no eggs, there's no milk, right?
more of the agritourism kind
Sure.
of element of the
Sure.
bona fide farm statute that will drive you nuts.
Yeah,
Okay. Thanks.
yes, sir. How we doing on time, everybody? We want to keep flying on through?
Looks like you've only been here 28 minutes.
Oh, nice.
It didn't spring for.
Right.
All right, so are we on, since that's agricultural, I think we can skip that. Made Tom made some good points. Institutional uses. So colleges, universities allowed in RR and ST. Correctional facilities change there for the ag districts and a special use for the suburban transition.
You're on the the
Institutional uses, community and government
Okay.
services.
that first item there, the banquet hall. Now, what it should, should be a limit on how big it would be in the ag district. I mean, we're looking at a 30,000 square foot banquet venue would cause me heartburn.
I think maybe a PA for that.
Maybe so.
Or a special use permit?
I'd go with a PA, I think. If you said something, the square footage is my issue there. I don't know what the right square footage would be. But, I mean, I could envision a huge venue and would not be well suited for an ag district.
PA for that. I mean, wedding venues are a big thing now out in the rural areas. Everybody wants to get married in a barn.
Yeah. So, yeah, and you're exactly right. Wouldn't that lead us to allowing them in the ag district?
To a certain size. That's my,
So you mean
this is
permitted
my,
with additional regulations?
Yeah,
right,
Or
PA,
a special use permit.
PA or.
And that's where I get back to the agritourism stuff and the bonafide farm exemption. There was a court case out of Orange County, the barn at Chapel Hill, that was a big mess. I don't know all of the particulars, but
Any other comments for that section?
Yes, sorry. Government services administrative. Now that again is size, you know, if it's a small, single, story building, possibly so, but if it's something like the Department of Education building, 8 stories, 10 stories. I'm not saying it's a possibility, but it's kind of open, it's an open. Should be in the ag district.
You have to take that one up with Brian, because I think Brian explicitly made me change that and said, why wouldn't we want to put our buildings wherever we want?
The chances of us putting up an 8-story building in snow camp are pretty.
There is a height,
point.
there is a height limit in the county.
I'm just saying.
But that's,
What about fire department? You want 100%?
Fire department's fine, but
If it would be,
well, typically they're not, because they have to be, serviced in small areas, so typically not very big.
That falls under emergency service.
Yeah,
That's different than a government administrative facility.
right.
You know. Why would you want that in the ag?
Brian,
You know what, it's not gonna happen, so I'm not all.
They wanna put it out there so they can get out of Graham and have some parking.
Right out in the middle.
right. What's not gonna happen, change the classification.
Yeah.
I think my main thought was, I don't really want one part of Alamance County telling the other part of Alamance County what to do. It's gonna make it weird, but,
There you go.
that's mostly what I was thinking about, but I'm, you know.
Or take banquet halls off that.
Do you think banquet hall should be a different category than?
I don't take it all. I mean, you have to have it on here, I'm just asking.
We don't have to have it, we don't have to have anything.
Go back to colleges and universities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would say no.
I don't know where ACC's farm is. I don't remember if it's in Evans ETJ or the county.
The bank loves got this guy saying.
Huh?
To the county.
No, it's in the county. We did some
I
work
got
out
both
there.
one.
But I don't know if it's in Evans ETJ, and I'm not sure if it's blue or green here, but ACC does own a farm,
Yeah.
and it is technically a college.
Mhm.
And they have classroom space.
They got some trailers up there.
Yeah, they got a double wide trailer, yeah.
You know
I
where it's
mean-
located?
My glasses don't blow it up well enough to tell you where it's, but it's out Jim Mountain Road and
Yeah, they're on Jim Mountain Road.
it's Kate's Farm.
Yeah.
It might be in the blue. So it
Tennessee
might be-
State's got one on Turner Road too.
Yeah. So I see that you have it as an egg, but, well. But again, they're grandfathered in, so.
And is that really the college, university, but again, we don't have any definitions of what every one of these is, but are we talking about the Elon College, or are we talking about they own some property out in the county that they do some?
I'm talking,
activities?
the state of North Carolina owns a farm for the use of Alamance Community College. They have a classroom and they have farming classes out there. They have chickens, they have turkeys, they grow crops. And they have classes, and you gotta
So-
be there at 9 AM for a class for 50 minutes and.
You talking about one on Turner Road, Buster Sykes donated to NC State, they're going to monitor. To come, that was the covenant, part of the covenant. I think, but there's 2 of them in the same area. And
It
they
is
do have
Covington,
classes.
it is Covington,
Yeah,
Covington
Covington
Farm,
donated it to
Yeah.
NCC, but the state has one over on Turner Road, they got, and that was Buster Sykes.
and I don't think they do like classes like ACC.
You got some buildings and stuff back there, they got a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, Minor does, yeah.
No, Turner now.
Turner does too.
Got a bunch of people there
But
today.
is that
So-
state classes?
NC
NC State?
State.
It ain't not what all they do.
Well, but anyway,
So the intent is the primary campus of the college university.
so however you word that, I don't know,
So,
but
I mean, it's a great point to think about other properties or agricultural properties they might own, so
So they have
I'll just make a
plans.
note and I'll.
ACC has plans to expand.
Yeah.
It would surprise me to see them put a building or so out there, and there'd be a good use for it too.
Yeah.
It looks to me like. And they're promoting agriculture, so I wouldn't
Yeah,
see why.
a chicken coop, if you need to borrow some eggs with the current egg price.
Could they simply, have that agricultural property classified as bona fide farm and then they wouldn't have to worry about these rules?
I mean, I don't know what your rules would say about
There's
it.
also a statute that exempts the state and, municipalities, from zoning if a building isn't being erected, constructed, or used. So
Right.
it's open use of land, but
Right.
again, I don't know how all of this would work with across that. State thinks there shouldn't have to be any zoning or anything like that, so
Right.
they will challenge it.
Yeah,
Uh,
like an open air development.
yeah, if it were
It's
just
not
land
subject
and
to,
they were wanting to use it. I know one example was, Rocky Mount City Schools wanted to do a, bus parking lot. And the city of Rocky Mount made them get a special use permit. It got denied. It went to court. The court said that statute wouldn't let you regulate it anyway because it was just an open use of land, it's a parking lot.
They have
So there may be
a
some,
mobile classroom unit that has a permanent foundation on it, hooked up to a permanent septic and a well, and their intention is to build a barn for classrooms. It is vertical construction.
I don't know what danger we're trying to protect from
Hmm?
there. I said, I don't really know what danger we're trying to protect from
We're not, I mean, I'm just saying
by
that
not allowing it in agricultural areas.
Yeah, I mean-
That's a reasonable thing to do.
VA or SU or something, but it's, yeah.
Especially for agricultural lands.
Yeah.
State is a big bet.
Maybe they need some of their landscaping classes at some point up there. Maybe they start a side farm. I don't know.
Everybody, but.
Sorry.
you good? All right, any others in that category?
So how do you mark these up, Matthew, as far as going back to them later, or what you're just making a note of?
Yeah, so I'm making notes here and I'll go back and
Okay,
make the edits.
okay.
Institutional use is healthcare. I didn't have any changes on my spreadsheet for that. Anybody else? You have anything for that category? Institutional uses, transportation, communication, and utilities. So we, provided a definition for a park and ride terminal, and now they're allowed everywhere. Thoughts?
Okay, so park and ride, okay. I always think park and ride there, but this is park and ride in the community, people trying to, consolidate and carpool going into Durham or Chapel Hill.
Yeah.
What the case may be.
Yeah, commuter lot or parking lot with public transportation connections that allow, or may have public transportation, allow commuters and other people, heading to city centers to leave their vehicles and transfer alternate forms of transportation or carpool for the remainder of the journey.
Kind of what old folks used to think about using church parking lots for during
And
the
ours
week.
are already used for that sometimes. Nothing, no problem with that.
Okay. Utility facilities, we had some questions about this too. And marking special use for the, rural communities and the mill villages. So this, I'm thinking of basically like a transfer station, like a Duke Power transfer station, right? Where you have to have those throughout communities, but typically they're fenced off and a gravel lot and that type of thing.
Well, let me go back to this, though. One thing, the second, airport facilities, okay, so.
Yeah.
This is minimum lot size, what would be, so PA? You got a PA in ag district. So I'm just asking a question about that.
Sure, yeah, so that's something where, part of my plan is to do a little bit more research into typical airport facilities and especially rural airport facilities, and I assume that they are on a, you know, typically a 5, 10, 15 or so acre property. You gotta have a larger space to land and take off airplanes, right? So I don't have a specific number in mind there, that's just kind of a bookmark to remind me that I need to do some research and figure out what might be a good minimum threshold for airplanes.
They used to have one on Fifth Street in the city limits.
Wow.
Sure did.
Now there's houses there.
Aircraft.
Going out. It's in Orange County, I think it's off of, Meadow Oaks Road.
The Dutchie.
Yeah, there's a housing
Well,
development.
it's painted off of Tom Road.
Yeah, the
You're
Dutchie.
going down
That's-
54, take a left on
that's-
Tom.
Oh, that's a subdivision, right?
It is.
With hangars and
Yeah,
next to the house, yeah.
It was a private.
Yeah.
I remember looking at houses on Zillow and I saw them like, well, I ain't got a plane, but that's pretty cool.
Houses around it, right?
Yeah. Each house has a hangar.
Mhm.
That's really cool.
And the one on Fifth Street, he actually sold, and now it's a housing
So should
development.
that,
Right.
would that be a
It was there for
SU
years.
instead of a PA in the ag district?
It could be, yeah, part of my thinking was the additional regulations are just gonna be, figuring out what the minimum lot size needs to be and maybe some type of landscaping to provide a buffer from adjoining parcels. But,
So this wouldn't be really a minimum lot size, it would be a multiple acre, this wouldn't be a 5 acre, this had to be 30 acre, 20 acres, something.
Could be,
So
yeah.
this issue would be something to consider.
all right, any others for the category?
Excuse me.
Commercial uses, eating and drinking. I did move. I want to say that I moved, restaurants or one of the others into this category. I don't have the old table in front of me. But I moved it into this category and nothing about the allowance has changed there.
What's a specialty food service? What would that be?
I think that's like a catering business.
Okay.
That could potentially be one of those home-based businesses that we talked about.
Could be.
If you got a
Okay.
commercial
Yeah.
kitchen,
Right.
the health rules will
Yeah.
get you on that. Any reason why we wouldn't consider allowing a restaurant?
Yeah.
Like, if
Where?
I'm thinking out, like where Buckner's Hill is, if that large area developed and you've got,
kitchen.
got employees, working out there, if they want to go to lunch, they've got to drive into the Graham. I mean, just as,
Yeah, so to me, again, this is kind of one of those tough questions that we have to ask ourselves is if we're going to try to steer development into certain areas, then what's the cutoff point for pushing things like restaurants into the rural centers, or the mill villages or the other more dense locations? It's, if certain things are just kind of allowed anyway, then you don't really have any guiding regulations that give shape to the area.
I know we talked about it, but, agritourism is a big thing, and if somebody's got a farm, that might be excluded. You said that, if it's a bona fide farm, can't they have a restaurant, cafe in as
Well,
part
they
of
make
that?
their own ice cream and they sell it there.
Right.
You know,
That's especially food service.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think they could have like a full-scale restaurant that would not be regulated as a restaurant, even if it's on a farm.
Right. I mean, I'm saying that, that's kind of a big thing, is farmers having their own, ice cream. They make it, they sell it, Maple View Farms. I mean,
Orange County, that was
I know.
on farm use. They had it was a farm, it was a dairy farm.
Right.
They built a building on the corner. And it was an ice cream parlor and they sold their products there.
Wow.
And it was deemed a bona fide farm. There's big,
And there's
a
one.
lot of fight over that.
In Julian, they're
Mhm.
very
Oh, yeah.
far, and
Old
they
Man
fill
Creamery.
give it
Yeah.
their milk and make their own ice cream.
Right.
But it's not a full-scale restaurant.
These are things that will come up
Yeah.
once this goes active.
Yeah, I think,
That is the questions you will be getting.
So you may have the creamery or the farm to table restaurant, but if it's allowed, you're also gonna have McDonald's. Right. I mean,
And McDonald's can claim modified farm statute says.
but I'm saying if you allow it in the agricultural district, if you allow restaurants, restaurants in that district, you're opening the door to any and every
I
restaurant.
was saying in the EC district. So EC, we were.
well, I'm talking ag,
Okay.
I'm talking ag, you know, because the Homeland Creamery, the Maple View,
Yeah.
it fits. I think what farmers need to be able to do to keep their farms.
Well, what if the anchor to allow that is that to have that type of use, it should be a bona fide farm?
Right.
And, you know, that might be a provision to allow that use, but your typical restaurant wouldn't be a bona fide farm.
So what if we say like agricultural food services or something like that, and it is explicitly
Accessory use.
a restaurant or a food vendor or something like that, which is explicitly incidental to the farm operations.
Right.
So you're milking the cows, then you're making the ice cream.
Right.
Or you're growing the sweet potatoes, then you're serving them up for dinner.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
One triggers the other.
And you're selling your honey, I mean, yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's what.
That's a big thing.
They had agritourism more than hot dog.
Is that next to a hog farm?
That's next to the whole farm.
Next to hot dog. Now the sausage is made.
Actually, a bratwurst off of a hog farm sounds pretty damn good. Right about now, yeah. I know Michelle's getting hungry.
And sleep.
You had to call her.
I heard her mention it earlier.
Oh, gotcha.
All right, anything else for, eating and drinking? Commercial uses, offices, no changes there.
Wouldn't an adult sanctuary business, wouldn't that be more of an entertainment use?
Could be, you know, that is specifically called out in the UDOs, that's on. ordinance
Yes, that
Article
depends on
6,
how
Part 2. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Entertainment. Okay.
Office, yeah,
I see.
sounds weird.
That's
weird.
Well,
Kind of office work is.
Different category, right?
Yeah, yeah, I just thought that was not
Commercial
a
use.
spot.
They get on you, Matthew.
Gotta have some fun with this stuff.
yeah, that's probably the thought on it.
Right.
All right, other than transferring that into the recreation and entertainment category, so we changed the allowance on country clubs. There was also, if I remember correctly, conversation about fairgrounds, or is that a conversation you and I had, Brian?
It is usually,
So we have now distinctions between temporary and permanent. And a temporary would just be like, basically like a weekend festival, right, up to 96 hours. Indoor shooting ranges pretty much allowed across the board. Outdoor shooting ranges, hopefully we can just gloss over that and not even talk about it.
Watch that.
Are you being, really? Okay.
Yes, yes, you can.
Recreation and entertainment facilities outdoors, more allowances there, more allowances for breweries and more allowances for distilleries.
Why would you go over outdoor shooting
I feel like there's sarcasm there. Yeah.
It was a joke.
You want to get a bigger sarcasm sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I mean,
Yep,
It's
Go
wide
ahead.
open.
I was gonna say, why wouldn't it be a special use in the ag, at least in
I
the ag?
suggest that would suggest you.
Yeah. A shooting range.
It takes more than.
So part of,
Outdoor.
Outdoor.
so part of why I have permitted with additional regulations is when this was drafted, the county attorney was, and may still be, working on a set ordinance to regulate outdoor shooting ranges.
Yes,
I don't know,
Standalone.
that's the last I would
Changed
so
recently.
I don't know the status of that.
I don't anticipate any further action being taken.
Okay. So, if that goes away, we can do special use permits, we could contemplate a land development ordinance to regulate shooting ranges.
Let me ask this question, Brian, why was it dropped?
Commissioner discretion.
And it should be issue or something like that, then it's going to be dropped. I mean, you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so in my opinion, we need to at least address what is being shot at the range.
Yeah.
And that is, if it's an archery range, and that's not a huge deal. Even with a crossbow, that's not a huge deal.
Right.
If it's trap and skeet, that's a little more, but still not huge. And if you're gonna be limited to handguns and 22 rifles, we absolutely need to have, in my opinion, a progressive scale on the outdoor shooting. In other words, what's being fired on this range versus the size of the property that is being fired on. And I think it would not be wrong for somebody, and if I had time, I'd be glad to do it, to reach out to the Corps of Engineers and see if they don't have a specification for the berm that you shoot into, far as the width at the base, the slope, and the height, and what it's made out of, because I understand that sand is a little less deadening than clay based on its compaction. So, you know, if you're gonna have a Sherman tank out there, you need to really be shooting into a wall of dirt. If you're just shooting a 17 or 22 caliber rifle, you still need to be shooting the ground, but not quite.
Rodney, what, I'll tell you the advice that I gave Matthew on this was let's only touch 1/3 rail at a time. And shooting ranges are a big one and land use is a big one. And I probably don't want to tangle both of those up together as we try to get our commissioners to tackle these really big issues. So I don't disagree with you at all. We need something to do with shooting ranges. We've tried that recently. There's not an appetite for it. I think I would prefer for this ordinance to kind of leave current regulations in place and let's focus on that in its own time. I don't make the rules around here. That's just what we were thinking.
Well, and I hope you didn't hear what I said is pushback against that. I've just offered my opinion based on what I know. And as at this point, I'm done.
Yeah, I agree with you. The best guidebook that I've seen is the NRA range book from, I don't know how long ago, but they are, you know, they and other industry professionals have figured out proper berm height, density, material, distance down range, side berms, trajectory away from houses, possible landscape, signage, fencing, things of that nature. Anytime I've ever been on a shooting range, you will not find a more safe environment for firearm use than when you're on a shooting range.
Right.
Because, most range operators are very, keenly aware of those types of safety protocols. So those exist, those best practices exist, if you want to call them regulations, you know, those exist. How deep we get into that as a county, I don't know.
Well, okay, so maybe I wasn't quite through. When I was a little boy, I remember my granddaddy Joe saying, Rod, that's my gun. It's loaded. Will kill you. Leave it alone. And at a point, he got out in the backyard and taught me how to shoot. And the second thing he said was, after it's loaded, it will kill you, leave it alone. Do not point it at anything you do not want to shoot. If you don't want to shoot the house, don't point it towards the house.
Yeah.
And the third thing he said was, before you pull the trigger, make sure you know what you're shooting at and what's behind it, because you might miss.
Mhm.
So, the government trained him how to shoot in the Second World War. Not everybody gets that training. I'm not sure that the government here or wherever can regulate firearm use. If you don't start out on day one training, the person's gonna be using the firearm. So to what you said, Brian, I get it. Because you're standing back here looking at an onion and all the layers. We're sitting here looking at it like this, so, yeah.
All right, any other comments on that section, recreation and entertainment?
I just meant that any reason the recreation entertainment facility indoor got left out.
Yeah, so a lot of the other uses, you know, like a theater, a restaurant, or those types of things. Yeah, it just seemed to me to be redundant to have the indoor facility.
Oh, thanks.
Yes, sir. Good
Like,
question.
the skating rink I wanna build inside, it's not.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So,
Not that they're beating up.
that's-
us,
yeah.
but-
so that's why there's the allowance at the beginning of the table of uses to allow for an administrative interpretation.
There you go.
If you live in it, it's a home-based business, it'll be.
You got a loft in the skating rink. Next section on funeral related uses, no changes at all there. Same with the next section on retail sales and professional sales. I've got no changes unless y'all do. Next section, commercial uses, vehicle and service sales and related use. That's where we got the home-based businesses, which we went over earlier.
I have a quick question. Oh. For retail sale, would there be any portion of retail sales that would be part of the whole tourism deal?
So very likely, yes. You
Like
know,
for
you've gotta,
merchandise, like t-shirts, hats, that sort of thing?
sure, yeah, you know, you got a beekeeper, you got
Mhm.
a small farm stand, something like that. If it's in the ag area and they're engaged in that, I think ideally they're set up as a bona fide farm and that's
Okay.
just part of their operations. And so.
So you wouldn't have to have the
They wouldn't have
the
to have
P
to
here
worry
and
about.
okay,
Yeah, this is more like a,
a standalone.
yeah,
separate
like
apartment.
roses or something like
Gotcha.
that.
No, yeah, okay. All right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And on the back there, the last three sections, I don't think they need to go through it all.
I was gonna ask what a recycling drop-off station could be in the R district. Seems like it's a kind of a convenience service.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know what those look like out in the county necessarily.
Orange County got a bunch.
Pleasant Grove Community Center has one.
I was just saying, let me give you an address.
Yeah.
So,
Little parking lot with chain link fence around it,
yeah,
either dumpsters or roll-off cans in.
an in and an out. and-
Yeah, I would think you want that.
Yeah, it makes sense, yeah.
You got more density there.
Actually, it probably should be switched to P should be X and X should be,
Yeah.
just making a comment.
Say that again?
And it almost looks like, the recycling drop-off station, you know, the ag would be an X and the rural residential would be a P.
So not allowed in ag, excuse me, but allowed in the rural residential. Okay.
I kind of like them being allowed in ag. I think it would promote more recycling. I don't think they're all that intrusive, but
Well, we got a recycling, you know, the trash picked up, is that recycled?
yeah. Is that county, well, some people don't pay for it. Some people don't. You do it, they just wait and take it. Yeah. Cause I've done that in the past, then I got tired of making the trips, so then I started paying for it, but yeah.
Yeah, is that countywide?
Well, I can't answer that countywide, it's not probably, we do have a pickup.
Yeah,
It's
we do in Pleasant
available.
Grove, I have it,
Man,
It's available
it's available.
if you choose.
if you choose to buy, pay for the service, yeah.
Well, there's probably services that are throughout the county area.
I would think so.
I would
It's a very good business. If you got a good territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny Macron used to do it north of the county.
I don't know, I've kind of like the, having more options for them to be located for drop-off stations for recycling. I think that would, because a lot of people don't recycle because they don't want to pay for the service and there's nowhere convenient
Yeah.
to take it. And just a thought.
Just adding more work to you, maybe a PA.
There you go.
Or SU.
That's the compromise, I suppose, yeah.
So allow across the board? Is that the consensus? Or not allow it?
Or the PA, I don't know.
Yeah, require some landscaping and.
I mean, if you're gonna have PAs on the landfills and the ag, then why would,
Yeah, again, just landscaping, screening, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Anything else? We're gonna have a long meeting next month.
Longer than this one.
Well, all right. Has that got you through your old business,
Yeah.
sir?
That's got me through that.
Well, we don't officially have any new business in March. Does that mean there ain't none?
I have kind of a couple questions.
Okay.
Especially if we are gonna move into taking a look at the ordinances. Soon. So we've talked a little bit about a 5 acre minimum in ag areas and a 2 acre minimum in the rural residential areas. One concept that I've been introduced to recently and thought a lot about is obviously having your minimum lot size, but having an option for basically an average lot size or kind of a density target. So imagine a situation where these regulations come into play and a new subdivision proposal comes in. And many of the lots are a quarter of an acre or half an acre, relatively small. And others are 3 acres, 4 acres. So they vary within that development, but the average comes back to the 2 acre minimum that is the desire. Right? We could keep the cluster open space requirement in there, keep some other features in there. So I just kind of wanted to gauge y'all's interest in that. It's a
Is
little bit of
that
a
to allow a developer to come in and have several different products within a single community?
Could be, yeah.
Yeah,
There
okay.
could be, well and septic issues, there
Yeah.
could be topographical issues, road access, other issues that might make it make more sense to have a really small lot here right next to a rather large lot, just as a hypothetical example. But your average comes out to the 2 acres
Across the whole track, yeah.
in the one area or the 5 acres in the other area. Just something to think about.
Well, that's kind of what you're doing with the clusters in a way.
Sure.
Instead of having that whole area being reserved or park space, you're just putting larger lots in that section.
And I guess maybe this would be perhaps an option as opposed to the special use permit option. So we talked about if these rules go into play, a traditional subdivision, let's just say it's 5 acres per lot.
Mhm.
The cluster option, which you talked about, or a third way, where if they couldn't achieve the open space, they could request a special use permit and go through the process of the planning board. This might supplant that special use process.
So at the end of the day, if the number was 5 acres and you had 50 acres, you only had 10 houses, with the understanding that not every house was sitting on 5 acres.
Right. But the average of the development would be 5 acres.
Yeah.
Or you only had 10 houses.
Yeah.
Which, okay. And that would be subject to the health department where the well and septic would work and would not work and what.
So you would potentially have a lot of, potentially, depending on the land, to have a lot of houses clustered together and then the open space from there out.
Yeah.
But with that, that doesn't really agree with the rule setting of certain places that you're looking for, right? Because you got cluster houses. I'm just saying, I don't know that, I'll have to think about it, but, I
Can I amend his description of that? So you can envision it. I don't know many likely scenarios where you're gonna have a quarter of an acre with a well and septic tank and a largish house. Maybe a tiny home, maybe. So that may have not, I know mathematically it might be a good description, but half acre maybe?
Yeah.
It's probably more likely. Because you have to have, the well has to be a certain number of feet from the septic, and you have to have, you know, the repair area.
Or you may have kind of a blend in one single development that have several small lots that are on a community well and septic
Yeah.
system, but then the larger lots that are on their own well and septic.
Or I guess you could have a repair area with the easement on somebody else's lot.
Sure.
Or on the open space. lot.
Or in the open space.
Or the
yeah.
open space, yeah.
Share.
Just something to think about. Kind of
It'd be
again.
really quirky to get it down to a quarter of an acre.
You're right.
Hey, you bet, be real good.
Yeah. Everything that the stars would have to align.
Yeah. So another aspect I've thought about a lot is, you know, when I've heard the planning board talk about some of the issues that arise from sprawl and kind of the more traditional development that's taking place in the county. And yeah, I think you brought this example up a few times on 62 near where you are. You went from open rural area to driveway, right, stacked on top of each other. So we've talked about and thought about really tightening that requirement to force a new road into a neighborhood as opposed to just stacked up right along an existing high-speed state maintained road. So right now, as the subdivision ordinance reads, a major subdivision is 15 or more lots. We can kind of play with that number, or we got class 1 minor subdivisions and class 2 minor subdivisions. Class 2 minor subdivisions hit at 5 lots. So maybe the thought is, once a development proposal is 5 or more lots, that's when you have to have the interior road. And part of this too is reducing conflict points with somebody coming in and out of their driveway and somebody speeding by at 60 miles an hour.
Yep.
I recently went to an NCDOT training where they said the absolute #1 way to entice an accident is basically a 2-way stop. Or, you know, a scenario where somebody's slowly coming into the path of your oncoming 50 or 60 mile an hour traffic. So I've thought about these ideas. I don't have them yet in draft form in the subdivision changes, but I kind of just wanted to float it out there to you guys before I.
No, I like that
I
concept.
like that concept.
And just for clarification and definition to some of you newer people to the planning board. If you've got an existing state maintained road and you cut a lot off of that road, that's not a subdivision. And if you put two houses side by side, and you can go on up the road 50 miles, that's not a subdivision.
The creation of any lot under 10 acres in the state of North Carolina is a subdivision.
But as we talk about subdivisions and rules and whatnot like
Sure.
that,
Yeah. But definition, subdivision is dividing land, but a subdivision development community is what we're talking about.
okay, so it's not a development.
Correct.
Obviously, it is
Correct.
subdividing land.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But in other words, when you talk about homeowners associations and all this kind of stuff. And from the development side of it, there's minimal infrastructure cost in it because they're not having to build a road. So that's
No civil engineering, anything like that's involved.
none.
Sorry, what's that?
The attorney to subdivide, the surveyor to survey.
Yeah, the technical definition of subdivision is different than what people commonly think. When you say the word subdivision, people
Right.
envision the suburbs of Cary.
Correct,
right?
yep. Yeah.
When us nerds think about it,
Subdivision, just a
we
plat,
can be
yeah.
talking about as simple as one or two lots.
Right, right.
So, yeah.
So I guess everything past Adam and Eve has been a subdivision on some level.
That's right.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yep. And English common law was the start of all the regulations we got. It was.
So that's all that I've got on my end, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Has that included your announcements?
Yep.
What, now, wait a minute, there was a comment I had before you started talking about the road access. We were talking about the average density, right?
Mhm.
I think I could get on board with that. Because I mean, like I said, doing a cluster subdivision, that's kind of along the same
Yeah.
principle as the average density idea.
Exactly.
And I remember I thought now, so for us, I could think of a scenario where along the fringes, a large tract of property that may have access to some public utility for water and sewer mains, and then a larger portion of that same property, it wouldn't be feasible to extend those utilities inward, maybe due to terrain or subsurface, too much rock or something.
Yeah,
But the other thing with rock, if it's too much rock, it may not be suitable for septic.
yeah,
But in some scenario like that, maybe there's a creek crossing, they don't want to pay for boring under the creek for gravity sewer.
yeah.
Then it makes sense for those lots closer to that infrastructure to be at a higher density. Whereas on the backside of that property, maybe the larger lots make more sense.
Sure.
So using that average density could be advantageous for something like that,
Yeah,
I think.
good example.
Sorry, that was fair.
Sorry.
Are we ready for a motion?
I
Move that we adjourn.
Second.
okay, so we got a motion to second. We out.
I would say it.